The movie starts with a woman sprinting through a pitch-black forest, screaming for someone to help her. I guess she chose the bear. I'm kidding. We then cut to Sarah, who suddenly wakes up from a horrifying nightmare. Instead of going back to sleep like a normal person, she immediately starts throwing her belongings into a bag. And there's a reason for the panic. The woman we just saw running through the forest is actually Sarah's twin sister, Jess. The previous night, Sarah received a call from the Japanese popo with some terrible news. Jess has been missing for several days. According to witnesses, Jess was last seen entering Aokigahara Forest. So naturally, a missing persons report was filed. If you've never heard Aokigahara, it's a massive forest at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan. It's also infamous for the number of people who go there to end themselves. Aokigahara has developed its own collection of creepy legends. Many people believe the forest is haunted by restless spirits. She immediately calls her husband and tells him she's going to Japan to search for Jess herself. Sarah is completely convinced that her twin is still alive. Rob tries to convince her not to go, but eventually gives in because he has work commitments he can't abandon. Sarah can't understand why the police haven't already started searching for Jess, especially since the school where Jess worked had already reported her missing. But the police aren't exactly in a hurry. They explain that Jess entered the forest by herself, so they believe she didn't intend to be found. They also tell Sarah that if someone hasn't been found within 48 hours of entering Aokigahara, they're usually presumed to have taken their own life. Once Sarah reaches Japan, she decides to start looking for Jess the next day. That night, she stays in her hotel and starts researching Aokigahara. Bad idea. Instead of finding useful information about locating her sister, Sarah ends up seeing countless photos of people who had died by you-know-what, along with belongings they left behind inside the forest. The more she sees, the less she understands why Jess would ever willingly go somewhere like this. Sarah starts wondering what could have possibly pushed her sister to enter such a horrifying place. Eventually, she falls asleep, and naturally, the nightmares return. The next morning, Sarah heads to the school where Jess works as a teacher. The second she enters Jess's classroom, the students start screaming. Sarah hasn't done anything, she's just standing there. Relatable. One of the girls explains that she thought Sarah was Jess. Since everyone already knows Jess disappeared after entering Aokigahara, the students believe Sarah could actually be Jess returning as a Yurei, a restless spirit that has come back to the world of the living, maybe to delete her search history. The principal then explains that Aokigahara has an even darker history. According to an ancient legend, the forest was once associated with Ube-suit, a tradition in which elderly or seriously ill family members were abandoned in the wilderness to die. As time passed, Aokigahara became infamous for the large number of people who went there to you-know-what. That eventually led to the belief that the spirits of the dead remained trapped inside the forest, unable to find peace. Before leaving, Sarah asks permission to look through the room where Jess had been staying. Maybe there's something there that can tell her where Jess went. While searching, Sarah finds old childhood photographs of herself and Jess. The photos bring back memories from before Jess moved to Japan. Sarah remembers helping Jess prepare for her new life. Sarah continues searching and discovers anti-anxiety medication, along with several brochures and maps of Aokigahara. Now things start making sense. Sarah realizes Jess had been struggling with anxiety and begins to suspect that it may have played a role in her decision to enter the forest. Sarah doesn't waste any time. She gets on a train and heads straight toward Aokigahara. Once she reaches the station, she goes directly to the visitor center and asks whether anyone has seen Jess. That's where she meets Mari, a staff member who tells Sarah something that immediately gets her hopes up. They found Jess. Sarah follows Mari downstairs into the basement. For one brief moment, Sarah probably thinks she's finally about to see her sister alive. Then Mari takes her into the morgue. Yeah, might have been on purpose. Mari explains that every body recovered from Aokigahara is kept there so relatives can identify missing family members. Thankfully, Jess isn't there. Sarah is relieved, but she still refuses to believe her sister is dead. She asks Mari to help her find someone who can guide her through the forest. Mari says no. She explains that people aren't willing to guide visitors into Aokigahara anymore. Even people who leave ropes and other markers to help themselves find their way back can still become hopelessly lost, and many of those people are eventually found dead. So basically, Aokigahara comes with the worst navigation system imaginable. No GPS, no reliable compass, just trees, darkness, and terrible decisions. Sarah tries using her phone to find a map of the forest, except there's no signal. Of course there isn't. Even the cell towers looked at Aokigahara and said, "We're staying out of this." A little later, Sarah meets a woman named Sakura, and asks her if she knows anyone who can take her into the forest. Sakura immediately refuses. She's afraid of the Yurei. She explains that these restless spirits are believed to feed on people's grief. According to the legend, someone carrying deep emotional pain is especially vulnerable inside the forest. The Yurei can deceive them, make them see things that aren't real, lead them away from the path, and eventually push them toward you-know-what. So the forest isn't just trying to make you lost. It's basically psychological warfare with trees. Sakura warns Sarah that the Yurei can use her sadness against her, manipulate what she sees, and eventually make her want to die. Sarah asks whether a Yurei could actually be looking for her. But despite everything Sakura has told her, she still doesn't believe the stories. And she's still determined to go into Aokigahara and find Jess. As night arrives, Sarah decides to spend the night at a nearby inn. Not long after, she's approached by a man named Aiden, who introduces himself as a journalist. During their conversation, Sarah explains why she's in Japan. Her twin sister disappeared inside Aokigahara, and Sarah came all the way from home to find her. She even tells Aiden that she's willing to enter the forest alone if that's what it takes. Aiden immediately warns her that Aokigahara is incredibly easy to get lost in. But Sarah, being Sarah, decides to Sarah it. Coincidentally, Aiden is planning to enter Aokigahara the very next day to gather material for an article. He explains that he'll be accompanied by a Japanese friend who knows the forest trails extremely well, then offers to let Sarah join them. There's just one condition. Aiden wants to use Sarah's search for Jess as the subject of his article. So Sarah gets a guide, and Aiden gets a story. But will Sarah find her sister? Stay tuned for the next episode. I always wanted to do that. Anyway, Sarah jokingly asks if she'll become a celebrity in Australia. Aiden tells her she might, but not as much as the narrator. Sarah agrees to the arrangement, and they decide to enter Aokigahara together the following morning. Later that night, they keep talking, and Sarah opens up about her childhood with Jess. She reveals that after their parents died, she and Jess were raised by their grandmother. The next morning, Aiden introduces Sarah to Michi, his Japanese friend and a local guide who knows the forest trails. Before they even leave, Michi gives Sarah some bad news. He warns her that there's a good chance Jess is already dead. Sarah refuses to accept that. She's convinced her sister is still alive. Michi explains that Jukai means sea of trees. He's also hesitant to take Sarah into the forest because he can sense how much grief she's carrying. He warns her that entering Aokigahara in that emotional state could make her vulnerable to the Yurei. According to Michi, the spirits prey on people's sorrow. They use emotional pain to deceive people and make them see things that aren't real. Sarah basically receives a supernatural warning, a psychological warning, and a survival warning all at once. But she's Sarah. At this point, the red flags aren't even waving anymore. They're doing a full choreographed dance. Sarah insists on entering regardless of the danger, so the three finally head into Aokigahara and start following the trail deeper into the restricted area. Michi reminds them again that Jukai means sea of trees. I hope you're listening, Sarah. Aiden then points out another problem. Their compass won't work properly because Aokigahara sits on large deposits of iron, which interfere with the magnetic needle. Michi gives them another important warning. If they see anything strange or terrifying, they shouldn't immediately believe it's real. It could simply be an illusion designed to trick their minds, because apparently, Aokigahara is a haunted forest trapped inside the body of a normal forest. Not long after, they come across a man sitting alone outside his tent. Michi suspects the man might still be struggling with the decision to end his own life, so he walks over to check on him. While Michi talks to the man, Aiden asks Sarah what she'll do if they reach the end of the day without finding Jess. Sarah doesn't even hesitate. She says she'll keep returning to the forest until she finds her sister. Then she reveals that Jess had attempted to end her own life twice before. Both times, Sarah managed to stop her. That's why Sarah believes she can save Jess again. She explains that one of those incidents happened while Jess was living in Florida, where she was found unconscious. That was her second attempt. So Sarah isn't just looking for Jess. She's convinced this is another chance to save her. After Michi confirms that the man is safe, the group continues through the forest. As they walk, Sarah notices ropes and ribbons tied around the trees. Michi explains that people use them as trail markers so they can find their way back out. But there's another, much darker reason some people leave them behind. Some people tie ropes to treeing that someone will eventually follow them and recover their bodies. At this point, even the trees are saying, "Please go home." A little later, the group decides to follow one of the ropes that looks like it was placed recently. And that's when Sarah sees something horrifying. A body is hanging from a tree. Michi and Aiden immediately take the body down so the forest authorities can recover it later. And just like that, the group has unlocked the worst hiking experience achievement. After spending hours searching through Aokigahara, they eventually discover a yellow tent. Sarah immediately recognizes it. It's Jess's. And for Sarah, this is the first genuinely hopeful sign they've found. Jess's tent is here, which means Jess could still be somewhere nearby. They search the surrounding area, but there's still no sign of her. As night approaches, Michi suggests ending the search and returning in the morning. Sarah refuses. She wants to stay at the tent because she believes Jess will eventually come back. Michi warns her that Aokigahara becomes much more dangerous after dark. He also reminds her that people carrying deep emotional pain, like Sarah, are especially vulnerable to the U-ray. At this point, Japan has given her approximately 17 warnings, and she's collecting them like Pokemon. Aiden decides he won't leave Sarah alone, so he stays with her while Michi heads out of the forest before nightfall. Before leaving, Michi tells them to remain at the tent. He promises to return the next day so they can continue searching together. That night, Sarah and Aiden sit around the campfire and talk about their pasts. Sarah admits that she believes Jess must still be lost somewhere nearby. She explains that Jess had to deal with the trauma of seeing their parents' bodies and believes Jess carried that pain completely by herself. Eventually, Sarah starts feeling sleepy and goes inside the tent to rest. Aiden stays outside to keep watch. But sometime during the night, Sarah is once again hit by a terrifying nightmare. Sarah eventually wakes up for real and steps outside, and sees the night watch asleep beside the campfire. Then Sarah hears something. A voice. It's coming from deeper inside the forest. She looks toward the trees and sees a mysterious figure standing in the darkness. Sarah immediately follows it. Because she's Sarah, the mysterious figure turns out to be a young woman named Hoshiko. Hoshiko tells Sarah that Jess needs her help. Then she drops a much more disturbing warning. Don't trust Aiden. Sarah asks why. Hoshiko tells her that Jess has met Aiden before. Then Aiden's voice suddenly echoes through the forest. He's calling Sarah's name. The second Hoshiko hears him, she turns around and runs deeper into the woods. Sarah immediately chases after her, as one should in a haunted forest. But Sarah doesn't get far. She suddenly trips and injures herself. A short while later, Aiden finds her and helps her back to the tent. The next morning, Sarah and Aiden decide to continue searching without waiting for Michi to return. And considering everything that happened the previous night, Sarah apparently still thinks traveling alone with Aiden is a completely normal decision. As they make their way through the forest, Aiden decides to follow the river. He believes it will eventually lead them out of Aokigahara. Honestly, following a river sounds pretty reasonable. Except they're supposed to be waiting for the guide. You know, the guy that knows the way inside the forest, where people always get lost? However, while they're making their way through the forest, Sarah suddenly spots a dead body drifting downstream. Since the haunted forest wasn't giving enough red flags, the river decided to step up. They continue walking, but Sarah soon notices something strange. Aiden is heading in the opposite direction from the path they were following earlier. Aiden explains that they're following the river downstream, so they're still heading the right way. Makes sense. Except when Sarah looks back at the river, she notices that the current is now flowing in the opposite direction. To be fair, she knows the forest is playing tricks on her. She just doesn't know what is real anymore, and the bizarre change leaves her confused and wondering whether they're even following the same path anymore. While they're making their way through the forest, Aiden's phone suddenly rings, and instead of a normal ringtone, it starts playing a recording of the conversation they had the previous night. Sarah immediately realizes that Aiden secretly recorded their entire conversation without telling her. Which is definitely not suspicious at all, besides the secret recording. Aiden quickly explains that he only recorded it as notes for the article he's writing. Sarah is not buying it. She's already lost in a haunted forest with her missing sister potentially somewhere nearby, and now the journalist traveling with her is secretly recording their private conversations. Then Hoshiko's warning from the previous night suddenly comes back to her. Don't trust Aiden. And now Sarah's brain is connecting dots like it's solving a conspiracy board at 3 a.m. She starts suspecting that Aiden is hiding something and might somehow be connected to Jess's disappearance. Overcome with emotion, Sarah grabs Aiden's phone and deletes every recording. Then she starts scrolling through it, and suddenly, she finds a photo of Jess. Sarah's suspicion instantly goes from something feels weird to something feels weirder. She becomes convinced that Aiden deliberately approached her and had already met Jess before. She accuses him of lying. Aiden repeatedly denies everything, insisting that he's never met Jess. But Sarah isn't listening anymore. She throws his phone aside and runs into the forest alone. And just like that, the world's worst hiking partnership officially breaks up. After separating from Aiden, Sarah continues deeper into the forest by herself. She starts tying ropes around the trees as trail markers so she can retrace her steps. As she walks, she suddenly hears a whisper telling her to turn around. Sarah tries to ignore it and keeps moving, then the voice gets louder. "Turn around, Sarah. Turn around, Sarah. Turn around, Sarah." Bro, even the forest is trying to help her. Sarah finally loses it. She sprints through the forest as fast as she can. She falls into an underground pit. Meanwhile, Michi returns to the yellow tent where Sarah and Aiden spent the night. But when he arrives, both of them are gone. Michi immediately realizes something has gone horribly wrong. Bro understandably goes back. He reports their disappearance to the forest rangers so they can begin a search. He also contacts Rob. As soon as Rob hears the news, he flies to Japan to join the search for Sarah and Aiden. Back inside the underground pit, Sarah is still injured and desperately searches for a way out. As she moves deeper through the cave, she suddenly comes face to face with Hoshiko again. Sarah, two Sarahs, zero peace. With that unsettling smile, Hoshiko tells Sarah to follow her if she wants to find Jess. Sarah follows without hesitation. What could possibly go wrong? Moments later, Hoshiko's appearance slowly transforms into something horrifying. Sarah screams and immediately turns around. She runs as fast as she can while desperately calling for help. During her escape, she finds a small camera lying on the ground. She turns it on and discovers a series of photographs. The images suddenly trigger memories from her past. A short while later, Aiden hears Sarah screaming and manages to find her. He helps Sarah climb out of the pit. Aiden explains that he found a forest ranger's radio and managed to call for help because the ranger station isn't far from their location. Even after everything that's happened, Sarah still doesn't completely trust him. Aiden then tries to prove that he genuinely wants to help Sarah find Jess and has no intention of hurting her. So he gives Sarah a knife to make her feel safer around him. Nothing says, "I'm trustworthy," like handing the person who suspects you a knife. Later, Sarah walks to the riverbank to clean the wound on her hand. She removes the bandage, and suddenly sees maggots crawling out of the wound and slowly burrowing into her wrist. Sarah believes the horrifying sight is real. She raises the knife and prepares to cut open her wrist to remove them. Thankfully, just before Sarah can hurt herself, Aiden calls her name. The sound snaps her out of the hallucination. Aiden then takes Sarah to a forest ranger station he discovered earlier. There's no radio, but at least they have a place to sleep, which is basically the haunted forest equivalent of saying, well, at least the Wi-Fi works. Once inside, Aiden begins repairing the radio so they can call for help. But Sarah's suspicions immediately return when Aiden asks to borrow the knife he previously gave her. I don't know which is the red flag anymore, guys. While Aiden works on the radio, Sarah explores the building. Eventually, she discovers a locked door. She's convinced it leads to a basement. Then she hears Jess's voice coming from the other side. And that's all Sarah needs to hear. She immediately believes her sister is trapped inside. A few moments later, a small note slides underneath the door. The person Sarah believes is Jess asks whether Aiden is nearby. Sarah confirms that he is. Another note appears. It warns her that Aiden is going to kill both of them and tells her to take the key to the room. Sarah believes every word. No questions, she grabs them from the kitchen and confronts Aiden. Aiden calmly explains that the key is inside his shoe and says he'll get it for her. But as he reaches for the knife, the two struggle over it, and Sarah accidentally stabs Aiden. Before he died, he says that her sister is not here. A few moments later, the locked door suddenly swings open by itself. Sarah steps inside, and she is horrified to find the bodies of her parents. She finally discovers the truth. Her parents didn't die in a car accident like she'd always believed. Their father actually murdered their mother before taking his own life with a gun. Jess witnessed the entire tragedy after going downstairs first. Their grandmother had covered Sarah's eyes before she could see what happened. So Jess was the only one who knew the horrifying truth about their parents' deaths. That trauma left Jess struggling with severe anxiety, while Sarah unknowingly buried the memory deep inside her subconscious. And now the movie finally explains why Sarah's brain has been acting like it has 47 tabs open. Suddenly, their father's corpse comes back to life and attacks Sarah. It grabs her arm. Sarah believes she has no other choice. She severs her father's hand and escapes the building. Outside, she's surrounded by countless Yu-Rei. As I would, Sarah desperately runs through the forest. Then she hears Jess calling her name. Sarah immediately races toward the voice. But Hoshiko suddenly appears and stops her. And now she reveals the horrifying truth. Sarah thought she had been cutting off her father's hand. But in reality, she had been slashing her own wrist while trapped inside a hallucination created by the U-ray. Hoshiko explains that Sarah had already died inside the old house after bleeding to death. Moments later, the restless spirits haunting Aokigahara drag Sarah away until her body is swallowed by the earth. Sarah becomes the latest victim of the U-ray, and the tragic part is that she was warned about basically everything. But she wasn't explained with a Minecraft video below. Don't enter the forest. Don't trust what you see. Don't let your grief control you. But because she refused to believe the U-ray existed, she dismissed every warning sign. Eventually, she became trapped inside a series of hallucinations that ultimately led to her death. Meanwhile, Aiden had genuinely intended to help Sarah from the beginning. Unfortunately, he became another victim of the hallucinations that had completely taken control of Sarah's mind. And it's strongly implied that Hoshiko was actually one of the U-ray all along. She deliberately manipulated Sarah, exploited her grief, and drove a wedge between Sarah and Aiden. Meanwhile, Rob, Michi, and the forest rangers continue searching for Sarah and Aiden. Then suddenly they're startled by a woman running out of Aokigahara in complete panic. To everyone's surprise, it's Jess. Rob immediately rushes over and asks if she saw Sarah anywhere inside the forest. Jess looks completely confused. She explains that during the 4 days she was trapped inside Aokigahara, she never encountered anyone. The forest rangers escort Jess toward a vehicle for evacuation, but Jess refuses to leave after learning that Sarah traveled all the way to Japan to find her and has now disappeared instead. As Jess stares back toward Aokigahara, she suddenly goes silent. Her expression becomes completely blank. It's likely that at that exact moment, she realizes the bond she shared with her twin sister has been severed following Sarah's death. Although Jess spent more time inside the forest, she managed to remain calm and resist the U-ray's influence. Sarah, however, entered the forest with overwhelming grief and anxiety. That made her much more vulnerable to the hallucinations created by the U-ray. In the end, Rob and Jess leave the area. Before departing, Mi takes one final look toward Aokigahara Forest. And then he sees her, Sarah. She's now one of the U-ray, wandering through the woods. She went to the forest looking for her sister and left as part of the forest's population. By the time the search is officially called off, neither Sarah's nor Aiden's body is ever recovered. And with that, the story comes to an end. Slap that juicy like and sub button if you're not Sarah.